All right, let's talk about one of history's wildest transformations. We're going to unpack the incredible story of Australia, how an entire continent went from being the world's largest, most remote prison to a place people all over the globe dream of living. It's a story of survival, of outcasts, of gold, and of reinvention. Let's dive in.
I mean, just look at this. This really tells you everything you need to know. On one side, you've got Australia today, home to some of the world's most livable cities, where life expectancy is well into the 80s. And on the other side, you have its origins, a brutal penal colony, a place of harsh labor, where in the 1870s, you were lucky to live to be 34. The difference is just night and day. It's staggering.
So that brings us to the big question, the one we're here to answer. How on earth does that happen? How does a place designed for punishment, a place people were sent to as a last resort, become a paradise that people actually aspired to live in? That's the story we're going to get into. And here's our roadmap for the journey. We'll start with Australia's deep, ancient history before Europeans ever showed up. Then we'll cover the arrival of that infamous First Fleet. We'll get into the gold rush that changed everything, see how the nation was forged in the fires of world wars, and finally, look at how it became the modern, multicultural Australia we know today. Okay, first up, ancient land, new maps. This is where a human story that's tens of thousands of years old runs smack into Europe's age of discovery. To really get this, you have to appreciate the scale of time we're talking about. For something like 65,000 years, the ancestors of today's Aboriginal peoples lived here, creating hundreds of complex societies and cultures. Then, in what is basically a split second in historical terms, Europeans arrive. You have a Dutch navigator in 1606, but the real game changer is in 1770. That's when Captain James Cook sails up the eastern coast, maps it, and claims the whole thing for Great Britain. Next up, the First Fleet. And here's the wild part. Modern Australia exists basically because Britain lost a war on the complete opposite side of the world. Seriously, it was pretty much an accident.
So here's how it all went down. For a long time, Britain's solution to crime was just to ship its convicts off to the American colonies. Problem solved, right? Well, not after 1783. The American Revolution ends, and suddenly that door is slammed shut. Britain's prisons start overflowing, and they're getting desperate. The solution? Hey, remember that place Captain Cook found? The one that's as far away from here as you can possibly get? Let's send him there. And just like that, in May 1787, the First Fleet set sail.
After a grueling 8-month journey, they finally arrive in January 1788. The captain, Arthur Phillip, takes one look at their intended spot, Botany Bay, and basically says, nope, not here. He explores a little further up the coast and finds this perfect natural harbor, which he names Sydney Cove. You have to picture it. About 1,400 people, most of them convicts, the rest their jailers, basically dropped into a completely alien world, forced to build a society from scratch. But of course, they weren't arriving in an empty land. On paper, the official British policy was one of cooperation and understanding with the local Aboriginal peoples. The reality, though, was an absolute catastrophe. The settlers brought diseases the indigenous population had zero immunity to. A smallpox outbreak in 1789 alone is thought to have killed about half the Aboriginal people living around Sydney. Add to that the violent conflicts over land and water known as the Frontier Wars, and the impact was just devastating and permanent.
Okay, so let's move on to the next massive turning point in Australia's story: gold, rebels, and growth. Because if the First Fleet was the spark that started the colony, gold was the explosion that completely reshaped it. When gold was discovered in 1851, it was like a starting gun went off for the whole world. Look at this number. The population nearly tripled in just 10 years. That is insane growth. People flooded in from Britain, from America, from all over Europe, from China, all chasing the exact same dream of striking it rich. Now, when you get that many people together that quickly, all wanting the same thing, you're bound to get tension. The miners were furious about unfair taxes and having no say in how things were run, so in 1854 they launched an open revolt at the Eureka Stockade. Now, as a battle, it was a total failure. The authorities crushed it in minutes. But here's the twist. Public opinion was overwhelmingly on the side of the miners. The rebel leaders were all acquitted at trial, and the whole event became this legendary symbol for the Australian ideal of egalitarianism, a fair go for all that's still a huge part of the national identity. All right, now we're heading into the 20th century, and this is where Australia officially becomes a single nation, only to be immediately thrown into the fire of global conflict. So on January 1st, 1901, the 6 separate colonies unite to form the Commonwealth of Australia. And one of the very first laws passed by this new country was the Immigration Restriction Act. We know it today as the White Australia Policy. Its purpose was pretty explicit: to keep the nation's character fundamentally British by making it nearly impossible for non-Europeans, especially people from Asia, to immigrate. Just over a decade later, World War I erupts, and this young nation paid a truly terrible price: a 65% casualty rate. Let that sink in. Of all the soldiers who served, nearly 2 out of every 3 were either killed or wounded. It's one of the highest rates of any country in the war. And it was in the brutal, failed Gallipoli campaign that the Anzac legend was born. This powerful national story of bravery, endurance, and sacrifice in the face of impossible odds.
Then came the Second World War, and this time the war came right to Australia's doorstep. Japanese forces bombed the city of Darwin and even launched attacks in Sydney Harbour. This was a massive shock to the system. It proved that Australia couldn't just rely on protection from Britain on the other side of the planet. It was a huge wake-up call that forced a fundamental shift in foreign policy, pushing Australia to build a much closer alliance with the United States.
And that leads us right into our final chapter, the birth of modern multicultural Australia. This is where a post-war economic boom and new waves of people from all over the world would create the diverse nation we see today.
After the war, Australia's economy took off. They needed people to fill jobs, and they opened the doors. Hundreds of thousands of migrants came, especially from a Europe that had been shattered by war. And as all these new people arrived, bringing their food, their languages, their cultures, that old white Australia policy started to seem not just wrong, but totally impractical. It was slowly dismantled. And from that, a new, vibrant, multicultural identity started to take hold. It was also during this period that the country began the long, hard, and ongoing process of reconciliation with its Indigenous peoples.
When you step back and look at the whole story, modern Australia is really a testament to its incredible ability to adapt and to change. It's a legacy that started with those first unwilling settlers, the convicts who were sent there with nothing, and who, against all odds, managed to lay the foundations for the prosperous country that exists today. So, from a remote jail to a global cultural crossroads, it has been one heck of a journey. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? After completely reinventing itself so dramatically over the last couple of centuries, what comes next? What's going to define the next chapter of Australia's story?